We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Hi, and welcome to the Book Beat. I'm Jean-Noel Bassior, and we have got a fantastic show for you today. We have Rick Friedberg, who is a real Hollywood director, and he's written a book on how to make it in Hollywood, the inside story. So if you have a script, like everybody in California does, a script, I say they have a script, a real estate license, and what else? There's one more thing they have, and it doesn't come to mind right now. But so Rick is going to tell you the inside secrets. He's got 32 rules about making it in Hollywood. And then we're going to be joined by Ester Shfren. And she, besides being a phenomenal pianist, she has a piece of the World War II story that a lot of people don't know about, and this is about the Jews in Shanghai. And she's written a book called Hiding in a Cave of Trunks, a prominent Jewish family's century in Shanghai and internment in a World War II POW camp. And it's a piece of little-known history. Today is Veterans Day, and it's just a great day to hear about this story. So, without any expert, we're going to skip that because we often have an expert. This is the show that tells you to find a good book, and if you can't find one, to think about writing a book yourself, which is what our first guest did. And often we feature authors and experts talking about the world of publishing. But we're going to go right to our first guest because I know he has so much to say. And he's Rick Friedberg. He's an award-winning director-writer of movies. He did Spy Hard. He's done episodic television, The Real Housewives, and CSI Miami, and reality TV, The Real Housewives, music videos, documentaries, and national TV commercials shown on the Super Bowl. And his new book is How to Make It in Hollywood, The Inside Story, a humorous, enlightening insider's view on how to break into the world of showbiz and navigate its shark-infested waters. Really.
Good.
Filled with war stories of working with Academy Award-winning talent. Each short chapter explains a rule to follow to make it in Hollywood. And the chapters, the titles are very funny. It's, for example, The Moment You Trust People You Don't Know, Be Prepared for the Worst. If you write well, they will come. Book your next job before the star or the studio exec croaks. Always good advice, right? So how did you come to write this book, Rick? Why did you do this?
Primarily because people that I have been with who are in show business and in the book world, who I'm very friendly with, always tell me, your stories are so funny. And because I'm a comedy director, and I had no choice in that, my mother was very funny, and John Gielgud had the original quote which says, "Dying is easy, but comedy's hard." I didn't find it hard. I was the class clown in high school. At any rate, I gave a couple lectures, and then I gave 3 courses at UCLA Extension on the real technical aspects of how special effects and action scenes are made. And I invited experts I've worked with, and I usually did it with a bit of humor. So what I found out was I could get laughs. And although I've worked with a lot of comedy people who absolutely get laughs, I didn't see myself as an in front of the camera type. And I just thought, my anecdotes are getting laughs. Why don't I put them in a book? So I wrote a rough draft and sent it to a friend of mine who's a major New York Times bestselling author, who executive produced a TV series I directed. And she said, this thing is funny, and it's good, and it's really enlightening for video and film students, would-be actors, would-be comics, would-be composers, screenwriters. And it also appeals to those people who like Entertainment Tonight, who want the behind-the-scenes real stories.
So let's say somebody has a script. or somebody has the acting bug. And so, and you say passion is everything, right? And isn't that the first rule, really?
The first chapter is called It's All About Passion.
Right.
And there's 3 anecdotes in it, the first one of which is about Noomi Rapace, who was the actress who played Lisbeth Salander in the best-selling novels The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. She was basically a relatively popular TV actress in Sweden, kind of voluptuous and a brunette, beautiful, and didn't have a prayer to land that role, which she asked her agents to go after. So she went and lost 50 pounds.
That's amazing.
Cut her hair in a faux hawk, dyed it ink black, got piercings and tattoos, went in and blew them away, and she was, I'm sure you saw the movie, she was phenomenal.
Yeah. Passion is so important, isn't it? Because the people that I know, I've done celebrity interviews for years, and the people that I know who made it in Hollywood were passionate, right? Very single-minded. It's like somebody once said to me, Ben Weldon, he was an old character actor, and he said, the thing is, I never had a plan B. It was just plan A. That's all. He had to make it or else. There wasn't, anything else he wanted. So.
Well, that's another chapter that follows. It's all about passion is you have to be determined to the point of obsession. And although many people will tell you, I really think you need a therapist, they just don't get it. It's a driving force that you either do or die. I was lucky enough when I was 20 years old and I came out here and knew nobody. I had a screenplay like everybody else, but it was about the political activism in the 60s. And I sent it to Haskell Wexler through an assistant cameraman of his who I met. And he invited me to the set of Coming Home. And this was directed by Hal Ashby, who was an idol, and starring Jane Fonda.
And Wexler was a director, right?
Wexler did direct a movie about the 60s, but was primarily a cinematographer who won the Academy Award for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and a couple other films, Coming Home. At any rate, my point was that Coming Home, which Jane Fonda produced and acted in, only was made because she met Ron Kovic, who was the born on 4th of July Vietnam War vet.
Right.
And it was her clout and her passion that forced studios to give her the money to make that film that nobody wanted to make.
Wow. So it's passion. And so let's say that somebody is passionate. They do want to come to Hollywood. They want to make it. Let's say they have a script. What should they do?
I hope that they've vetted that script with 10 of their friends, and I hope they have refined that script to the point where they get honest feedback that says good characters, good dialogue, interesting offbeat story. Most agents say we don't read unsolicited material.
Right.
They don't read any material.
Yeah.
They give it to a person who just graduated Brown University last week, and they read it. And one agent once told me, talent will out. And I truly believe it.
Yeah, I do too. Isn't that the bottom line?
Yes.
Nobody's going to ignore real talent, right? As many horror stories as you hear, because it's the same way in the world of mainstream publishing. Talent, the first reader is just graduated from Sarah Lawrence University and is 21 years old, has no life experience, and she's going to look at your book proposal, But, they somehow, if it's good and if it grips them, it will. It's probably the same with the script, right? It'll get through, right?
That's it. Well, unfortunately now, Hollywood is in very, very bad shape because the money pool they used to have from the hedge fund people, et cetera, is gone. The foreign pre-sales are very difficult to get because they don't pay you up front. They pay you on completion of the movie. So people who fund movies and studios are loath to do anything that isn't what you call prepackaged with a major star, major director. It's exactly like getting a bank loan. Instead of having a house appraisal and your credit rating and your pre-approved dollar amount for the down payment, you have to have your script, your star, and your director, or they don't care. It can be the finest script in the world. And even if the 1 year out of an Ivy League school reads it and says it's good, it still has to go up the chain of command.
Right.
And the higher the chain of command is, the less likely they are to read.
So, I noticed in looking at you can look at Rick's book on Amazon. You can really look inside. It's got that feature, which is good. So, in a way, because on the one hand, you're saying it is tough, but this book kind of guides you sort of through the emotional mindset that you have to have, right, to deal with all of this.
Yes.
Isn't that sort of what the book really does, which is very valuable?
Yes. Well, it's filled with anecdotes that are personal and personal knowledge of other people who have given me their stories of things that people who haven't gone through it could never anticipate.
Yeah.
See, I don't come from here. I come from Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
The most, I would say, distant and disparate place you can come from to come to Hollywood.
Right.
And boy, was I wet behind the ears.
But you figured it out somehow, right?
Oh, we're never sure.
How'd you do that?
I'm not sure to this day if I've totally figured it out, because the one thing you can count on is every time you finish something, you have to start all over again.
You're only as good as your last
That's exactly
project.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So, but let's talk about, what's your favorite chapter in the book?
My favorite chapter, I would say, would be casting is difficult or more difficult than choosing a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because there are approvals. If you have a major movie star, they want casting approval on the people who play opposite them. Mm-hmm. If you have a studio and you need a star, they have the say-so in your star. But when you cast people, and especially if you've written it yourself, and you go through the process of auditioning, there's two things that happen. One is you see how you need to improve your material because a real actor is saying those words. And number two is your stomach is churning because this person sometimes is killing your material. So you just want to get up and smack them over the head.
Right, but you don't, right?
No, you never do. But my favorite anecdote has to do with casting as well. Spy Hard included a lot of action movie spoofs, one of which was a spoof of Speed. So we got the actual buses that were used in Speed. And when we were first casting, I said, I want either Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder to be the bus driver.
Wow.
The head of casting for this studio looked at me like I just told her daughter was pregnant. And the next day she called me, she said, I get it. This is hysterical. So we sent the script to Ray, and he read it and loved it. And we used the bus from Speed that was operated from the top. And we're on Hollywood Boulevard during the Christmas season because we wanted the production value of the windows seeing all the lights going through. Now, I'm the only person on the crew on the bus, and I'm hiding in the last seat with my headset and my little remote monitor. The rest of our normal passengers. And I see coming down Hollywood Boulevard 3 very large women in sweatsuits straight out of Branson, Missouri. And I know in my gut, the minute they get here, hell's going to break loose. Sure enough, Ray drives up as if he's driving, opens the door for Leslie Nielsen and Nicholas Sheridan to get on the bus because they're playing the James Bond and love interest characters. And the doors open, revealing Ray in a tux with sunglasses, simultaneously with these women looking in the door. I about died.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So you have to, the unpredictable can always happen as well. Yeah.
Always.
And they just kind of roll with it. So, but let's talk about like somebody who's got the acting bug. And so they come to Hollywood. And given that, like you say, it's probably more difficult than ever. Actually, I have two questions for you. One is, what would be the best way to approach it traditionally? And then what about YouTube? How has that changed everything?
YouTube has changed everything. In fact, the internet has changed everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely fabulous because when you say talent will out, you can actually see it and feel it.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point now where, for instance, on a reality show that I've wanted to pitch, you have to have what's called a teaser. They have to see what you're talking about. I'm fairly good at pitching an idea because I'm very well prepared and I speak extemporaneously, and I usually go in knowing what I'm speaking about. It doesn't matter. They have to see it on videotape. There's people that have gone on the web and their video has gone viral.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they've got a movie. And they deserve it.
Yeah. Well, the gatekeepers are losing their power, right?
They're losing their power because they don't have any money behind them, and everything now, it used to be you're awarded something because of something you did before that made money. So they could justify their jobs for at least another year, and they bet on something that allegedly was a proven commodity. Now it has to do with the number of clicks. If you have a viral video that gets 3 million clicks, you did something right.
Yeah, because there's nothing between you and the audience now. There's that, opportunity there with YouTube, which is kind of a way of like making an end run around the old system, isn't it? But let's talk about the traditional way. Somebody wants to be an actor. What in your book, did you address that in your book about things they can run into or mindsets that they should have to deal with?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Another anecdote is, again, because my pigeonhole is comedy, I lean toward anecdotes in that way. But I had a friend who is an improvisational comedian, actor, and incredible at it. Not great at auditioning because he chooses to do what he wants to do. And he went to one audition for a comedy commercial, having hollowed out half a watermelon and put it on his head. They didn't hire him, obviously, but they remembered him. I think memorability, taking chances, but also knowing the material. There's one young actress who's now very famous, I won't mention her name, who was a neighbor of mine. And when she was first starting, I told her the best advice I can give you when you go on auditions, because you get what's called sides, which is the pages of the character they want, 2 to 3 pages at most. I said, demand the script. You're going to be a pain in the neck. People might not like you. They may not give it to you. But if you know the script, you know what it's about, and you know where that character fits in, you know more than the next person next to you. And she did that, and she said it was the best advice I've ever gotten.
So it's not always about being nice then, right? It's about sort of demanding what you feel you need. I'm not saying to go and be demanding, but in other words, that seems like you said she took a risk there, didn't she, of not being liked or...
Absolutely. It's a razor's edge of being demanding and being curious, tactful, and skating that fine line of asking too much, knowing that they don't care about you because your name isn't on a billboard.
Yeah. Well, I looked at your chapter titles, and they are very funny, but I also do get that feeling that you're addressing this huge issue of they don't care about you because they don't, do they?
I don't think anybody cares drastically about anyone else personally.
Until you're a star.
Unless they can parlay whoever you are into something that will benefit them. Now, I have very long-lasting, wonderful relationships with crew and cast I've worked with, who I still get calls from that I haven't worked with in 10, 15 years.
Wow.
But those people have never gotten me work.
Oh, oops. Well, so, I mean, in a way, like it's sort of a dismal picture, isn't it, for most people trying to break in? I mean, the positive aspect is you love it. You're obsessed by it, right?
Yes.
But then it seems like you have to take all this crap, there's just so much.
Well, the bottom line is you don't have to take it. But if you do take it, you have to know you're taking it. And rejection, especially for musicians and actors, is absolutely unfathomable. Rejection for me is based upon the fact that they don't like my stuff, but at least I got stuff. Whereas if you're just an actor who's coming in here cold and you're putting your body on the line, it's like, I would say the analogy is auditioning for the role of the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, and you're naked. And you have to know that you're naked and not care. Because most of those people don't want you. They want that person that they heard about at lunch that 7 other studios are talking to.
So you're just kind of going through the motions, going through the audition, and yet something could happen, right? You could surprise them.
Exactly right. And you have to be prepared to surprise them. And you have to show, again, hearkening back to being redundant, your passion. You have to choose to be different. You have to also go along with what you think they want. And if you don't like the material you're auditioning for, do it anyway, knowing you're not going to get the job. Because if you don't like the material, you're not going to do it well.
So it all comes back to passion, really, doesn't it? It comes back to caring about...
Absolutely.
So what's the best advice that you could give somebody? I mean, I know the book is full of it, good advice, but what do you hear most from people? What do they ask you, knowing that you have this book? What's the question that you hear the most about making it in Hollywood or handling a certain kind of situation that might come up? Or
Well, the questions that are asked me are mostly more technical. How do you get through your day and get all these shots done? How do you talk to an actor who treats everyone on the set like they're a doormat? How do you talk to a famous cinematographer that moves too slow? That kind of thing.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, let's talk about that. So as a director, so you've had to deal with a lot of this stuff yourself, I mean, even though you're working, right? So how do you talk to the famous cinematographer when they're...
I really have only had one problem in my life, and I took the person... I mean, one thing I didn't say in the book, but I would tell everybody is, when you get into battles, choose your battles. Don't choose small battles, choose your big ones. And when you do, don't do it publicly. I once had a difficulty with a director of photography who refused to shoot a certain shot with a certain lens, and I took him into another room. And I said, I really like your work. I know you're helping me, and I know unequivocally you know more than I do. But you know what? This is my movie, not yours. And we became fast friends, and he said, you know what? I'm totally wrong, and I apologize. And it was wonderful. But generally speaking, I do everything with a sense of humor. I find people who have a sense of humor, and I beat them mercilessly with my barbs.
So what is the most surprising thing that ever happened to you on a movie set?
I think what it was the Ray Charles, but there's other ones. For instance, I did a music video for a group called Wasp, which is the group that was in the movie This Is Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
I had done Van Halen's Hot for Teacher, which made me very much in demand for heavy metal and hard rock music, which I didn't like and got pigeonholed. But at the time, MTV was not playing their stuff in heavy rotation. So I was one of the first people to actually write whole treatments for the lines of the song of what you'd see. And I approached that group who had called me on the phone. And I had just done an episode of The Twilight Zone when it returned to prime time.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, what if we take you guys into the Old West and nobody cares? Now, mind you, these guys range from 6'4" to 6'7" without their heavy metal boots.
Wow.
So we went to the old movie set in Tucson, and I was dying because I wanted a classic cowboy movie shot on the top of a building with the railing and a gun belt in the foreground and the bad guys coming down the dirt street with the sun backlighting them. Well, we had sent the band there the night before to make sure they'd show up because you never know with musicians.
Yeah, right.
And the sun is rising, and I know I got at most 8 minutes left, or my whole shot's blown. 7 minutes later, these 4 guys come down the street, wearing totally in black. One guy has chrome catcher shin guards, and I'm saying, this is money, man.
Wow. So, and I noticed that, just going back for a minute, you've worked with a lot of famous people, with Charlie Sheen, Nicolette Sheridan, who else? Leslie Nielsen, right?
Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase, yeah.
Chevy Chase was, my favorite person of all
Really?
was Dudley Moore.
Dudley Moore, oh yeah.
He was as funny off camera as on, and quick and smart.
Huh.
I did a Kenny G video with him, which is how I met Nicolette Sheridan. She played the sax goddess.
Wow.
At any rate, Chevy Chase, I did a bunch of commercials in Australia with him. And he was so much fun because he was just like the guys I hung out with at high school. He would come up with 12 of the lamest jokes, but the 13th would just knock you off your socks.
Wow.
And one thing that he did is we did this commercial after the famous lead singer for In Excess had committed suicide in an autoerotic accident. And the producer told him he was staying in, what was his name? Robert Hunchet's, his same suite at the Four Seasons.
Oh, wow.
So Leslie proceeded to hang belts from the header,
no.
put a towel around his neck, and put a Polaroid up for the maids to see.
Wow.
He's a funny guy. He's one of my favorite people.
What's it like working with Charlie Sheen?
That was actually a commercial for Japanese television.
Huh.
And he was at the time, I don't think, happy with his life. So he was
No
not,
kidding.
but he was gentlemanly. And unlike most people I've worked with, where I take through the script and get their ideas and tell them what I see, et cetera, he just says, just tell me where to stand, what to do. And it was a very, very funny commercial. And he was wonderful, but he wasn't as off the cuff, improvisational as he later became. And I'm sorry that I didn't know him in the post Bad Boy era.
Right. Huh. So, going back to your book, we just have a couple minutes left, and the rules are very funny. I like the one about never work with kids or animals unless you love them and realize they are in charge. I mean, this is like getting right to the essence of how it really is in Hollywood. So just for most of the people who watch this show, a lot of them are, they read books, but they write books as well. A lot of them are screenwriters. And actually, I do have one question for you along those lines. Did you know Gary Shusett by any chance?
Yes, I did meet
Gary.
him.
Yes. So Gary, I write about Gary in my book on early television. And but Gary had a philosophy, and I want your opinion on this. So I, wanting to make my book into a film, I got this best advice from a friend of mine who's a script doctor. And so my friend Tony, who's works on a lot of major movies, said, okay, you've got to start with a good script. You have to have a good script, and I noticed that you say that too, right? Okay, so I'm going like, well, I don't really have a good script yet because I'm not a screenwriter, but I have to kind of figure that out. Okay, so then I talked to Gary about 6 weeks before he passed away, and he loved the show Space Patrol, and we were talking about the people that would remember that era of television. And Gary said, here's how it works in Hollywood. He said, it's not about having a good script. He said, because these guys at the top that you want to excite about your project, you want to get to those guys because they can get a good screenwriter. That's not a problem for them. Where do you fall on this spectrum? Like which way? Gary and Tony said two opposite things. One said you have to have a good script, and one said, it's not so much about the script, it's about, the concept, pitching the concept and getting to the right people.
Well, the concept is all important because it shows you how unique it is and what pigeonhole or slot it falls, like Anchorman for Will Ferrell. But both of those opinions are right, and they also fulfill what is alluded to in my book is there are no rules. My rules are the rules for dealing with certain situations, passions, emotions, etc. But there's no hard and fast architectural blueprint for how to do it.
So your book is more situational, right? Like how to handle situations as they come up, sort of?
Now, I think it's more motivational.
Well, I see.
Motivational and situational. But having a wonderful script is always good, irrespective. But there was a guy in the LA Times who was head of a studio who once said, I don't feel that I've done my job until I've had 10 rewrites, mostly by 4 different writers. And the original screenplay probably was terrific.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. It's never the original screenplay that it ends
Exactly.
up with, right?
Yeah.
Because Hollywood sort of has this way that they do things. So it's kind of strikes me that your book, is this like for someone like it's almost like a handbook for, well, what if you come across this situation, or how should you go into that situation? Is it sort of like that?
It's sort of like that, but it's also pearls of wisdom that you don't know. It's things that you don't anticipate if you're a professional. If you're a car mechanic, you read the manual on how to disassemble a carburetor.
Right.
If you're a screenwriter and you read Sid Field's book, you can find the plot points of the ending of Act 2, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, there's that emotional, touchy-feeling style thing in everything. Acting, comedy, music, etc., that always breaks the rules, that gets people to see it, listen to it, like it for some reason that's visceral and unique to talent, which goes back to talent will out.
Mm-hmm. So your book is kind of about that magic, right?
Yes, yes. It's behind the professionalism, behind the work ethic, and behind the things you have to do. Here's what you have to think and be.
Mm. Tips from an insider who came from Wyoming and figured out this business. So where can we get the book?
You can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, booklocker.com, Books A Million.
All over. You have a website too, right?
I have a website, but I don't sell my book on my website.
Right. But if they want to find out more about you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's rickfriedberg.com.
Okay, spell it out.
It's RickFriedberg.com.
Thank you so much for being here on the Book Beat with us.
Thank you for having me. You were terrific.
Thank you. Well, stay tuned, folks, because today is Veterans Day, and there are still little-known stories about World War II that are still coming out. And one is about the Jewish community in Shanghai, China. And our next guest, Ester Shfren, was 8 years old when her family was forced into a Japanese internment camp. How did they survive? How were they treated? We'll find out when Ester joins us after the break. Stay tuned. This is the Book Beat here at LA Talk Live. We're more than just talk here.
This is Elena inviting you to join me every Wednesday at noon for Elena's Beauty Talk and more, exclusively on LA Talk Live. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio, R&B, or watch us on Ustream.tv. Reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
The American Heart Association's Heart Walk is coming. Bring your family, bring your friends, bring your coworkers. Help yourself and those around you to live longer, healthier lives. Form a team today and walk to help the American Heart Association defeat heart disease and stroke, two of the nation's leading killers. For more information, visit heartwalk.org.
Hi, this is Dr. Lewis Logan, inviting you to join me every Friday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon for Faith on the Front Line. We don't just talk about it, we are about it. That's our motto. Don't just talk about it, be about it. We highlight the issues and challenges that we face today and how faith communities and leaders make a difference. So don't forget to tune in to Faith on the Front Line, exclusively here on LA Talk Live. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio and R&B and watch us on Ustream TV. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hi, and welcome back to the Book Beat. I'm Jean-Noel Bassior, and I have with me here Ester Shfren. And she is the descendant of 5 generations of British Jewish nationals living in Shanghai for more than a century when World War II broke out, and her family was interned by the Japanese. And she's written an amazing book called Hiding in a Cave of Trunks, a prominent Jewish family's century in Shanghai and internment in a World War II POW camp. And Ester is a professional pianist and visual artist, and actually it was your love of arts that kind of carried you through some really difficult situations, right?
Yes.
Right,
Absolutely.
and she's wonderful. You check her out on YouTube, Ester Shfren. Beautiful renditions. She plays piano so well. So then she lived in 4 different countries after World War II, South Africa, and went to Israel, Canada, and she's been interviewed extensively about her family's experience because this is a very little-known story. And you were telling me that the reason that your family was arrested was because you were British,
Arrested.
right?
We were interned because we were British. The day after Pearl Harbor was bombed, the Japanese came into Shanghai and just took over everything, and then said, that all British nationals, Americans, Belgians would be incarcerated, and they would have to come and wear armbands showing that they were designated to be put into camps and deliver their cars.
And
to
you
the
were like 8
compound.
years old, right?
5.
You were 5.
Mm.
Wow, what was that? Do you have any memories of that day, or what was?
Oh yeah, yes, I have a lot of memories because I started my book with the early childhood and my memories of this privileged lifestyle that we had, where we would be catered to by servants and lavish home,
Because your family was wealthy, right?
Extremely wealthy. They
Right.
lived in a 24-roomed house. They had 12 servants. That's my father's family, who were the 5 generations. And Shanghai was a kind of place where, although there's danger everywhere, we did not have the kind of danger that we had, for instance, in South Africa, where your life can be in danger all the time. You could travel to the Bund on a rickshaw and you'd be passing dancing monkeys and letter writers, and you'd be smelling all the wonderful smells that go with the street vendors, like chestnuts and corn on the cob and sweet potatoes and all kinds of things like that. So it was a magical existence, even though we would pass a bundle on a doorstep, which could be a little baby girl that the family couldn't keep, or some child that had died. They would wrap it in a straw mat and just leave it on a doorstep. And we saw this, and it was part of our life.
It was called the Paris of the East.
Paris of the East.
Shanghai. And in Esther's book, you can look at some of these photographs. You have these marvelous photographs that you can see on Amazon. And I was very impressed with this photo of a street in Shanghai. For some reason, it looked just very magical. And that was taken around in the 1930s, right?
Shanghai, and all my Chinese friends agree with this as well. Shanghai has life of its own, and China smells different to any other country. I don't know why, but it's the food and everything that they cook that wafts across everywhere. And so yes, I would say that it was Paris of the East, and people could come from any country. There was no visa requirement because it was a treaty port.
Right.
And so you had a buzz that didn't exist anywhere else. Remember that a lot of crooked people are colorful.
That's
Okay?
true.
So,
Very colorful place.
Right. And also musicians came from Europe and from everywhere. Before the refugees arrived, there was a whole lot of, there was an influx of people from Europe who brought with them culture. In Shanghai, there were 50 magazines in 8 different languages. 50...
A real international city, really.
Extremely. And the Shanghai Chinese always regarded themselves as a cut above the other Chinese anywhere in China. They were very sophisticated, well-groomed, beautiful, elegant. And my parents, at their wedding, they had more than 600 people, and it took place in 2 ballrooms at the Astor House Hotel, where Charlie Chaplin stayed and Ulysses S. Grant stayed there. But they also had Chinese business people who came in beautiful brocade gowns, and the men wore, at the time, the long gowns, and the women were bedecked with jewels, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful place to be in.
So you were a child and growing up in this amazing world, and your father, how did the wealth come to the family?
Well, my first ancestors who arrived there came in the early 1840s, and they were shipping people, and they went to Qingqiang first, and then to Shanghai, and they were they owned 6 racehorses, and they were constantly at the races. My mother said that they couldn't even close their bags most days when they came home. They was bulging full of money.
Wow.
And they would do a deal on a handshake at the race course, my father with his business people, and my father was selling big property.
So he had a very wealthy family.
Very.
You were 5 years old, and obviously have these wonderful early memories. And then what happened?
And then it was like the day after the thing, we knew that our life had changed completely. But because the Japanese were completely unprepared for this intake, it was staggering. They actually did it in relays, and we were the last intake because we were a whole family that went in together, and we went into a camp with all the officials who had been left out till last because they had to organize their people.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit so people understand, because a lot of people are not familiar with what happened. So World War II broke out, Pearl Harbor, right?
Yeah.
And this now happened the day after Pearl Harbor?
Directly after Pearl Harbor. The Japanese had been in Shanghai for a long time already, and they were keeping Tokyo time even. They didn't keep the time of Shanghai, and they were in Hongqiu, which is the area they moved out of, and they put in all the refugees who had come to Shanghai, stateless people, right? So they went into the tram company and the electric company and all the big businesses, and they said, right, what's all this? Who's the boss here? Who owns this? Where are all your books? And they left 1 or 2 key people to help them learn the ropes, and everyone else had to leave their business right away.
Now, this was kind of like the Nazis in Germany taking the Jews, right? This was the Japanese going in and virtually arresting British citizens?
They didn't arrest them. They just told them they were designated for camp.
I see.
And that they had to appear at a certain place at a certain time. And we had all our papers telling us which camp we had to go to.
Well, how did your parents react to this?
There was a lot of stress, but everyone had the stiff, British upper lip. And they really tried not to let on. We knew that it was hardship because my father had managed to take a bit of money out of his office and put it into a bank and then take it out again. So we had a bit of money for a little while. But then as we ran out of money, the British Residents Association was giving us rations. So we were rationed wheat together with a recipe for how to make bread, and sugar we were given, and certain other things to tide us over. It was strictly rationed.
Now this was in the camp?
Out.
Oh, out.
Before we went into the camp.
Before you went in, I
When
see.
we got into the camp, of course, we had the rations. We were starving. It was very, very difficult. We ran out of everything after the 3-year period. People bartered things in the camp. The first camp that we went to was the public school for girls. And the public school for boys was also a camp. So it had a lot of amenities and things. But soon, towards the end of the war, the Japanese actually moved us into another camp, which was an undercover arms and ammunition depot, which was really it's supposed to be a hospital. But they actually were using it for that. And they thought if they moved us into that and they moved out, we might be bombed in error, and then the Allies would be scared to do any further bombing.
Oh, I see. So they were like using you as shields, kind of, or potential shields.
Right.
So now, what was the Japanese gripe with the British? Because the British were allies, right? It was for you guys. It was because Britain was obviously fighting against the Japanese in World War II, right?
It was because they allied themselves with the Germans.
I see.
And so that's why.
Right.
But they actually refused Maesinger. Colonel Maesinger went to Shanghai, and they refused his request to have a final solution for the Jews because there are 2 theories on this. One of the theories was that they would have a bargaining chip with the Americans if they lost the war. and that they didn't kill the Jews, they would say.
So the Japanese wanted to sort of act like, well, sort of almost the good guys there,
And
like
they
we're
didn't
not
really-
Nazis,
And
right?
they didn't hate Jews. You know, they didn't have the hatred of it. The people
Interesting.
who were the anti-Semites actually were the Germans and some of the Russians, not the Chinese, not the Japanese.
So what was it like? Like you were from 5 to 8, you were in this camp,
Yes,
right? And
right.
so what are some of your memories of it? What was it uncomfortable? What was the Japanese, were there guards? What was
Yes, the guards were at the gates, and my mother's family was not interned because they didn't have passports. They had come from Persia originally, 1917 more or less. And so the Japanese were at the gates, and my brother would kick a ball up to the wall, and my mother's family would walk outside, and she'd relay messages, coded messages, you know, asking us if we were okay, and Daddy's in the kitchen, and, you know, stuff like that.
So
that
your
they
parents, now, your parents didn't have passports, and so
They did.
Oh, they
British,
did.
yeah.
Oh, British, but they
Yeah.
weren't inside the camp?
We were in camp, sure, with the
the whole
with my
family was,
yes.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, because my father's family was British for many, many years, hundreds. They came from India, you know.
Right.
They were not Indian. They went from Spain to India to China.
I see.
And so British India, you know, entitled them to have British passports.
Well, you know, an internment camp, of course, usually we think of the horrible ones in Nazi Germany or in Poland,
It's
World
not
War
the
II in
same.
Europe. This was not like that.
We had no, not at all. We had roll calls regularly, morning and night, and the Japanese would slap a face or to take people away, and they would maybe never come back. They would torture people. We were starving. They stole all our parcels that the Red Cross had sent in that we were supposed to be getting. We were all thin. But the spirit in the camp was amazing. My mother wrote shows, and we put on shows regularly. Anyone who had any talent, and even if they didn't, they could go on a stage. The kids, there was no traffic in the camp because there were no cars or anything. So we could run around and roam freely, do whatever we wanted to.
So as a kid, it was sort of not so bad?
That's right. And my mother tried to make it into like a fun thing in a way at times, especially the hiding in a cave, because many people ask me what the title means. And it was because my mother put the trunks that we took with our belongings into the camp side by side. She put them side by side, put trunks on top, and then when the bombs were falling, she'd say, "Come on, I've made a cave of trunks. We're hiding in my cave of trunks." And we'd go in there, and it would be safer.
Right. So the Allies were bombing, obviously. The carriers were taking off from the South Pacific. The Allies were bombing?
Allies bombing, the Japanese were bombing, everyone was bombing. I mean, yeah. It was
So that was scary, huh?
Yeah, it was very scary. Yeah.
Any bombs actually land
We
in
used to, as soon as we heard as soon as we heard the bombs, we'd dive and shout, "The jams are coming." We called them jams. It was our name for them. And run under the tables wherever we could, you know, because our parents were always doing kitchen duties and different duties. Everyone in the camp had a duty. Yeah.
Such as? What would you do?
Gardening, kitchen, cleaning, teaching. Everything that had to be done to keep life going was done in the camp exactly as it would be outside.
So if you went about your normal activities in the camp and didn't get the Japanese angry, were you sort of left alone?
Yes, in our camp, they love children. The Japanese love children, so it was a win for us from that point of view. But the Japanese were much harsher in the camps where it was single-sex people. They punished men, they punished women in the other camps. But in our camp, we had an easier time.
So was this divided, like they put families in one camp and then single people in the other? Is that another one?
In some instances. In our camp and several camps in Shanghai, it was families together. They were all together. And which was very lucky for us because, I mean, could you imagine if we were separated, how hard that would have been?
Right, yes, because obviously that's what happened in Nazi Germany, you know.
And in China, and in the other parts of Asia where the Japanese were, they took some of my friends who are from China as well, their father was taken away because he worked for the government or something like that, or police force. They were taken away and never saw them again for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm trying to get a handle on this, because I do know a bit about, being Jewish. I know a bit about what happened in, Nazi Germany. I actually have a client writing a book about that, what it was like inside the camps. But the Japanese internment seems like a totally different experience. It's kind of hard to figure it out. I mean, now you do say they were abusive to some people.
Oh, sure. If you did anything wrong or someone tried to escape, or they would punish the whole camp, and they would torture the guy, and I've described it all. I haven't held back anything in my book.
So did you see any of this, or you heard it from your parents? You interviewed your parents, right?
Yeah, we just knew. It was all hush-hush, because they didn't want us to be any more distressed. It was trying enough for us to be in there. And my parents were young. They were in their 30s. So
yeah, what was the effect on them? You talk about that.
I think lifelong in a way. Although my mother was forever the Girl Guide leader. That was what she was, and she did it in the camp as well.
Like in Girl Scouts, right?
Yeah. But my father was always like a bit afraid of authority, and never. He was depressed for a lifetime, I would say, at times. Although he played the piano at every function and that, and he was master of ceremonies, he still never recovered in a full way.
So did you feel that your parents changed?
Yes, he lost everything that he had. My father lost everything. And more tragedies happened to that family as well, which I've described. And as a result of it, I think that he always feared that bad things would happen rather than good things, in a way. It was very hard.
So it was very hard on your dad.
He didn't have the patience with us. And my mother was phenomenal. My mother was 5 times a sports champion, and she's still alive. She's 98, living in Israel, and taught yoga until 2 years ago.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just turned 98. Taught yoga.
What a story in itself,
She taught herself to be a diving champion. She was a really true diving champion.
Wow.
Fancy diving.
Wow, when she was much younger, obviously.
She was in her early 20s, and she would go and watch the teachers, the trainers. I wrote, I was very lucky. I interviewed my parents over 17 years, and I got 100 pages of transcribed material. And that gave me so much to write with,
What was the worst thing that you saw in the camp?
It was the end of the camp that I saw something was really terrible, when we knew that the war was over already, because the word had got around, but nobody really knew what was happening. And an older woman came because her daughter was in the camp, and she was at the gate saying, "The war is over, my darling." And and the Japanese got hold of her and beat her up, and that was awful.
So it sounds like they were very unpredictable, kind of, right? Is it?
Yes, and they became much worse the minute they knew that the war wasn't in their favor anymore. They lost their tolerance and their patience, and their attitude towards us changed and was scary.
How long did that go on for? A few weeks, you mean? Or months? Yeah, just when they heard rumors.
Right, because, my father told us, and I wrote that as well, that there were Chinese people walking outside the camp who had worked for the British, and they were getting information. We also had an underground running as well. But they would actually pass a note over the fence. They would throw it over or something, and then it would say there, that the Allies have done this, and they've taken this place or that place. Because we had a lot of propaganda. There was Lord Haw and something Rose, a woman Rose.
Yeah, Tokyo Rose.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were telling you the war was going in their favor. Now, what happened after Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed? I mean,
that was the end. That was literally the end. The Japanese actually called us all into the quadrangle, and told us that the war is over and Japan is victorious, and we're not to leave the camp. They had their orders to kill us if they lost the war, but then the Red Cross came, and they came together with the military, and the Japanese disappeared. That was it.
They were going to kill you if they lost the war.
Yeah, yes.
Really?
Yeah, they had their orders to kill us all.
Wow. How did you find that out?
We had a fantastic underground system going.
I see. So you knew that if they lost, then so you were probably happy to hear the propaganda, like they're winning, everything's going fine, right?
Oh my goodness, it was really something. But then it was so exciting at the end of the war because as soon as the Japanese disappeared, but we were not allowed to leave yet because there were snipers and everything, all the flags of all the different countries came out, and we all stood and they sang the national anthem of every country that was in there, and you could imagine I feel chills running up and down me right now just with that, you know, and people were just emotionally broken down from joy and the relief of what, you know, that the war was really over and
the nightmare was over.
Yeah.
That must have been the happiest day of your life.
Oh, it was an amazing event. And also when I went back to our apartment with my father, that was something very special. Really, we went a while after the war ended because we weren't allowed to leave yet. And we went up to our apartment and there was nothing left. They had taken everything stripped. And we slept on blankets on the floor, my father and I, that night.
He must have been, you know, really devastated by the change in his...
It was really hard.
You know,
It was very hard.
Yeah. I interviewed some people, well, actually one guy in particular who'd been in a POW. He was a fighter pilot and shot down in World War II in the European theater. And same thing you said, you know, even in those camps that they had for the airmen, they turned to theater. And they and the guards, the Nazis, actually allowed them to have their plays and have their theater. Of course, they were starving. You know, I mean, he went from 190 to 135 pounds.
Absolutely.
You know, but they still were doing the theater, and they had a few instruments. You know, they allowed.
Fabulous.
That brought them through, sort of.
Fabulous. The Japanese all came to watch the shows, and not only that, they brought the commandant from the other camp with his guys to show off what our camp was doing.
Well, you know, and that's interesting. And actually, that's a question I have for you. That, you know, there are these stories of even the Nazi guards or the SS guards. You know, you get these flashes of humanity. Yeah. Did you feel that? I mean, these were soldiers. They were following orders. Did you ever feel, and I know you were young as a kid, though, that maybe they didn't like these roles that they were playing?
I'm sure, because our camp people were very friendly towards us. In fact, the commandant of our camp asked my mother to give him ballroom dancing lessons. She said, thank God it never happened because it was close to the end of the war and he was preoccupied with what was happening. But yes, basically, because before the war, we had Japanese friends and business, people. And then after the war, I've never hated the Japanese. People keep asking me that question because you can't fault a whole country for what happened through their stupid leaders.
Right, of course.
What they did was so bad,
Yeah.
so bad. There was no reason for it. You know, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it's the same situation right now with the Middle East, right?
Absolutely.
And many Americans would not, at all be what we're thought,
I
to be.
know.
Yeah.
I know, it's really true. And, I was very lucky to be invited back to London in 2005 to a show, We'll Meet Again. And there was a video shown there of Stalag, one of the numbers, where the men put on a show and they showed part of it and everything. It was fantastic.
The Stalag, that's what I wrote about.
Yes.
Yes, the Stalag Luft 3, actually.
I should show you that video.
Yes,
You would love it.
Maybe I would see my friend there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think you would love it.
Yeah.
It's a 1-hour thing, and I'm in a clip, a 10-minute clip, which I managed to show the other day, of these 3 sailors who were on board the Belfast.
Yes, that's pretty amazing that we're on board the ship.
And they invited us all to a party after the war.
Now, this was the ship that you kind of came on to?
No, what happened was the Belfast came to Shanghai to do relief work, and the sailors felt sorry for the children who had been interned for the 3 years. So they made a party on the ship and invited all of us, right? And they rigged up swings and things, and I'm on the swing.
Yes, there's a wonderful picture of you,
Yeah.
on the swing at
Right.
age 8 or afterwards. And so then later, so like what, 50 years later?
2005,
Yeah, 60
they
years.
reenacted the party, but they first had this BBC One We'll Meet Again program, and they found 3 sailors who had been on board at the time.
It's amazing.
And there I am sitting in a row with them and thanking them for the party. It was fantastic. And 4 months later, I was invited by the Imperial War Museum, and they reenacted the major party on the ship. And then by this time, they had found 120 plus
Wow.
kids who had been on the ship at the time.
That's pretty amazing.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm finding more and more people now who were in the camps and at school with me, and it was really fantastic.
What's the biggest lesson that you think we can learn from this, from what you went through? What's the thing that you learned from it as a child? What did you take away?
I have never had fear to take one step out of my comfort zone every day, because I found out that you can actually recover from almost anything if you put your mind to it.
Wow.
And so I've lived in several countries on my own, I have found out that there is so much to learn in the world if you only dare to speak to people and take a step out of your comfort zone. And I've got a lot of courage. I'm dare to do anything almost. And it's all as a result of my mother saying, we'll get over this. She dared to do fancy diving. I don't know how she did it. And so I say to myself, okay, you know what? We can do anything. I can learn anything. I can do anything. I can go anywhere. And my children have all picked that up from me as well.
What an
It's
amazing...
very important.
That's an amazing lesson to come out of such a traumatic event for a child.
I had 2 choices, right? Just die from it and say, that's it, my life is over. We lost everything, and I never got it back again. And it made life hard for me for the rest of my life, because eventually when I divorced, I still had nothing. But my parents lived in Israel, and they made life happen over there. They made it a happy life without money. We never had major money again.
So you learned resilience.
Total resilience.
And courage.
Extreme resilience. And
do-
that's the most important thing.
Right, because if your life had gone on in that privileged way, probably it's hard to say. But
Yes, I wouldn't have been the person that I am. I wouldn't have had the tolerance that I have. I wouldn't have made the friends that I've made everywhere in the world. And I've gone everywhere, slept on mattresses, been there, done that. No problem, And I got into Canada on a magic carpet, and I say magic happens the whole time. It's really interesting.
Wow. Well, where can we get your book?
It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and they have expanded distribution, so it's really pretty much available.
And do you have a website?
It's in progress right now.
Okay.
I really need that. But I blog a lot, and I send out notices nonstop, and I'm on all social media, all of it.
So let's spell your name, because your name is spelled a little bit differently than we would imagine.
Yes.
It's Ester Shfren, but you spell it for us.
So I write under Ester, Ester, no H,
Right.
Benjamin Shfren, which is also unusual, Shifren.
E-N, right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's a fascinating story, and also amazing the lessons that you took away from it. I think it's going to inspire anybody who's heard you say what you took away.
What I'm really happy with is that I do a lot of public speaking, and I don't have a nervous bone in my body. And that's come from that background.
Thank you so much. Be sure to be here with us. This is the Book Beat. We'll see you same time, next station. Same time, same station. Sorry, next week here at the Book Beat. And this is LA Talk Live, where we are more than just talk.
You are now tuned into LA Talk Live. We're more than just talk. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.